Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing the latest scandal in the government's ongoing battle to fail vulnerable children. Last year, it was largely about the fight to make sure that the government continued to fund free school meals properly when the kids weren't physically in schools, like holidays, for example. Now it's even worse because we thought we'd won a concession. We thought Boris Johnson had U-turned, announced that he was going to fund this after all, even looked like he was going to fund it for a bit longer than we expected. And it's just turned out to be another way to profit from the starvation of kids. And I mean that literally on this occasion. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So when I say the government are now allowing their contacts to profit from the starvation of vulnerable children, I mean just that. I don't mean they're not funding these programs properly and they're spending our tax money on other things that are not as high priority, and that's, in effect to be profiting from the starvation of kids. No, I mean directly profiting from their starvation. And what do I mean by this? Well, first of all, there's an image flying around social media, some of you may have seen it, of a food package that is supposed to last 10 lunches for a child in poverty. Now that's 2 weeks. The thing about the free school meals, it's kids who are in a household that's so poor they can't really afford enough food. Often parents will go without themselves just to give their child something. Most of them are going to be reliant upon food banks. And but in term time in school, they get the school lunch. But the pandemic has highlighted, well, what happens when you're not in school term time? And actually then people start to realize, actually, do you know what? If you think about it, when it's outside of school term time in holidays, children don't go into hibernation. They still need feeding. We should carry on feeding this. And bear in mind, this still doesn't cover weekends. But it's better than nothing. And so a free school meal, of course, in a school, when they're physically in a school, is easy to administer. During the holidays or during lockdown, when the schools are closed, other systems have been used. Money directly, vouchers, whatever. But now the government are using private companies to provide the food directly. I'm not sure how that's efficient. Surely it's more efficient just to give the families the money or the vouchers than to go and shop directly, but okay. Now, these companies have not been involved in a proper tender process. The government did not say, we've got a contract, different companies bid for it. It's gone straight to companies. Now, at that point, you go, hey, this is the same thing as all those dodgy COVID contracts, isn't it? Yes, it is. Inevitably, there will be questions about how close some of these companies are to the Conservatives. Can worry about that later. More serious issues now. Because this is an example of what such a company has sent for 10 lunches for a child. Now, with like the voucher scheme, the child's parents would have had a voucher for £30 to spend on those 10 lunches. You can do that. That works. This sad collection of objects was costed by someone from Asda at £5.22. They worked it out. From Asda, you could get this for £5.22. Yet the company was still given £30 of our tax money for it. Now, if I were told that a private company was given 6 times as much money as the value of the food they were providing, I would say that this was an outrageous use of public money. During this pandemic, we've seen dodgy government contracts given out. Now, there are different levels of these government contracts. On the lowest level, you've got some of these contracts actually will have been given to companies who can actually deliver the goods and services for a reasonable price. Fine. All contracts should be at that level. By law, all contracts should be at that level. 2, some contracts were then, it seemed, given to companies, we know now, given to companies who delivered the goods and services that we wanted. That was fine, but did so for a massively inflated price. And I don't just mean like on face masks because the price went up globally. No. Massively inflated compared to the market value even at the time. This, of course, adds to our national debt because we've had to borrow heavily this year. So it's all been piled onto the national debt for no good reason, but we did at least get what we needed, whether it was PPE, COVID tests, whatever. Then there were some contracts, again, we know this, that were given to companies, and these are going to be facing court action this year, who did not deliver the goods or services ordered. Sometimes they delivered something that was substandard, like the wrong face masks or a test and trace system that was not fit for purpose. Or, for example, that tracing app that went nowhere, but we still spent a fortune on it. Do not even know what's happened to that 100 billion quid that Boris Johnson gave to Dominic Cummings for his Operation Moonshot. But sometimes we got nothing at all, absolutely nothing. Money was still paid out though. And then we've hit a new level now. We've got to a new level. A contract is given out that actively harms us. Not just doesn't protect us, but is actually using vast sums of public money to malnourish vulnerable kids. Look at this food. So we've got a loaf of bread, 2 carrots, 3 apples, a tomato, 2 baked potatoes, or baking potatoes, and actually baked as they are, 2 bananas that already look like they're a bit on the turn, a can of baked beans, a few slices of processed cheese, a few small tubes of what I'm reliably told are yogurt, 2 small fruit loaf bars, and a small bag of pasta. It's not nutritionally balanced. You can't make, for 2 weeks, most of it wouldn't last 2 weeks before going off. What the bloody hell are you supposed to do that pasta for as well? I mean, even if the government were giving that company, say, £6 for this, for that £5, £22 worth of goods, and, the rest of it they're making on their own profit, and that at least wouldn't be mad profiteering, but it would still be failing to deliver meals for those kids. They're not actually delivering what they need. And the government promised to properly fund free school meals for kids outside of the times when they're in school. Good, we thought. They finally came around to deciding that starving kids wasn't a good look for them. We know they tried to resist it. They only U-turned based on public pressure, but they at least acknowledged that the public won't stand for it. And now look what these arseholes have done. They've got the nerve to bang on about all the money they're using to fund this programme. But the vast majority of it is going straight into the pockets of con merchants, whilst this sad collection of foods is supposed to last an already hungry child. Remember, this is going into a household where there is not enough food to feed people for 2 full weeks. And here's the grim irony for me. With the previous scheme, some of the more obnoxious than usual Tory MPs, which I know is a high bar to set, accused families of spending the money on prostitutes and hard drugs. There were actually Tory MPs that said that. Well, now that the vast majority of that money is going straight into the pockets of Tories, it's quite likely that that money now is actually being spent on prostitutes and hard drugs. Another example of how these truth twisters turn something they accuse the other side of in reality, allowing them into power, is actually what you're going to get. And in fact, someone thoughtfully, and God bless them, they thoughtfully got an actual £30 worth of food and photographed it for comparison. And this is what they could have been getting. It looks fresher, there's much more of it, it's nutritionally balanced, you've got everything in there. For a lot of people, because it has to be said, there'll be some people who go, oh, well, my child, you wouldn't be able to have that because vegetarian or Jewish or something. Because that's another thing to bear in mind. The packages that have been provided by these companies take no account of dietary needs, medical, philosophical or religious at all. And the Good Law Project has been taking up cases like this. Now, what I've just described here, this particular care package is the worst one I've seen. That's the worst I've seen. But there was a company the Good Law Project was reporting on that was not making as much of a profit proportionally. It was still making a hell of a profit. Still only providing a fraction of the value in terms of food that they were given. But they were sending things like, they were sending bacon to Muslim families. Some of the packages had rotten fruit and vegetables. Never mind a couple of bananas that's looking a bit close, but you could still eat them as they are now. We're talking about ones that are already past the point at which they're fit for human consumption. And this is a classic case of just how these Conservatives operate. They didn't want to fund the programme at all, but they were forced into it by public pressure. The money's being spent now. The money is being spent. Why not just spend it honestly? They could have just provided the food that's needed. But no, in what I can only see as an act of both spite and greed, they've not given the contracts up to tender. I mean, they shouldn't have given the contracts at all. They should have just used vouchers, but they did. They've gone for tender and they've picked companies. So they've hand-picked companies. And you almost feel that they probably told them to take the piss. I imagine there's going to be a question on this in PMQs. And I can predict the response. Boris Johnson will say, that he's spent all this money on the scheme. And most of the public, blissfully unaware of this scandal, will sit back thinking, that sounds, he'll even break it down how much, it is per meal per child. And it all sounds very nice. And people go, you can feed a child for that. That sounds fine. And they'll sit back thinking the government have helped the starving kiddies. And this is just the latest Tory scandal when it comes to abandoning our children. Let us not forget about the government paying out a fortune to actually what we know is a Conservative donors company to supply laptops to children who don't have IT access at home. They don't have a computer at home to access the online learning that teachers like myself are providing while schools are closed. Needless to say, most of those kids still don't have a laptop. This was a contract given out last year during the last lockdown. And we also found out this week that an internet provider in the UK offered the government to provide internet access for all vulnerable families, ones that didn't have it, at cost. They said, at cost, we're not going to make a profit on this. The government turned them down flat. Said, no. And this goes beyond the mere callous attitude to the poor that I beheld in the likes of Margaret Thatcher's Conservatives. See, I never thought of her as spiteful, just uncaring, which is bad enough at the time. But this is spiteful. My partner was saying, people need to see what the government are doing here. How are they going to? Labour are taking up the issue, of course. The Guardian, the Mirror. But where else? Where are people going to get this information if they don't watch PMQs, if they don't read the media that's not supported by the Tories? How are people going to find out? And this is spiteful. This is kicking down our children, our vulnerable children, not out of ideology, but some perverse pleasure, because the money's been spent anyway. Why not just spend it on feeding them? It's like it's like they so resent the fact that they've been made to spend this money that they're just out of spite going, well, we're going to make it really rotten for them. Literally, actually, in some cases. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.